And he said, regardless of what you think your limitations are, despite what's happened to you in the past, he said, the truth is you can have, do, or be anything you want with your life. That was pretty shocking for me to hear because up until that time, most of my learning had been in traditional school subjects, science, history, math. I had never had anybody talk to me about my mind and my potential. And also, up until then, I thought when you were born, you were dealt certain cards from the big deck, so to speak, and those are the ones that you had to play. Well, that's fine if you were dealt a great hand, but a lot of us weren't. And here's this person saying, no, it doesn't matter what's happened to you in the past. What is it that you want to do now? That's where you need to focus. Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works, How to Decide, Believe, and Begin to Live Your Best Life. My guest today is, you might have guessed it from the opening quote. Yes, it's me. People have been asking, Joan, what's your side hustle story? What's been your experience? Well, truth is, I've had many side hustles, as have all my guests to date. My story is no exception. Mine are as diverse as pop-up Christmas tree lots in a Canadian winter, to selling fresh flowers on the side of the road, to a string of country markets selling original artwork and Phantom of the Opera jewelry. Seriously, I'm not kidding. And rather than me highlighting the key takeaways at the end, they'll be peppered throughout. This and so much more on today's episode of Side Hustle Hero. My first side hustle was in my early 20s when I was working full-time for a bank in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My partner somehow talked me into having a pop-up Christmas tree lot. Now, what that entailed was securing a great location, sourcing the Christmas trees, and then somehow guessing how many trees we'd actually sell. That was tricky, especially the first year. The trees needed to be ordered in October for delivery in early December. And as you can imagine, if you don't order enough and you're running out, you just can't order more trees online through Amazon. And if you order too many, well, they go from being really valuable up until December 24th to the next day being completely worthless. We had secured a really good location. It was the parking lot of a well-respected garden center in the West End of Toronto. But we needed to come up with over $10,000 to buy the trees. Now, this was a while back. In today's dollars, that'd be literally over 30 grand. We didn't have any money to put towards it, but fortunately, given that my employer at the time was a bank, I managed to talk them into giving us a loan for the full amount. It was a risk. It was a huge risk. Again, we were in our early 20s and not exactly debt-free at the time. To give you a bit of a background, here's how it goes with a Christmas tree lot in Canada. The trees are delivered to your site in early December. How many people buy trees that early? I'll tell you, zero. Pretty much no one. So you spend your time standing around on your tree lot in the cold, freezing, very lonely, surrounded by thousands of dollars of trees that you have a loan outstanding for, which for a little while, there are next to zero sales. You start to seriously question your sanity. But then finally, after a couple of weeks of second-guessing yourself, people start to arrive on your lot. Thank God. Slowly but surely, person by person, family by family, the trees started going to their new homes. We popped the first bottle of bubbly when we had enough sales to pay back the loan. That was a huge burden lifted because after that, the rest was profit. We did that for a few Decembers until we moved to a different part of the country that was in the mountains, surrounded by live Christmas trees, and in an area where a lot of people just went into the forest and cut down their own tree. There was no serious market for Christmas trees in our new location. In fact, the retail price of trees that were being sold in that town was lower than what we were able to buy them wholesale back in Toronto. So my days of the side hustle Christmas tree lot, sadly, were over. When I left Toronto and moved out west, I had every intention of leaving the banking industry too, but that was not to be, at least not right away. The backstory is I had started working for Canada Trust, now TD Canada Trust, as a part-time teller when I was 16 years old. I'd work a couple of evenings after school and on Saturdays and really loved it actually. Then at the age of 19, friends of mine said, Joan, there's a seminar occurring in town. You should go. Now, they told me it was on business matters, predominantly marketing. So I thought, sure, why not? Well, it turned out the speaker that evening was not talking about marketing. He was talking about your mind and your potential. And he said, regardless of what you think your limitations are, despite what's happened to you in the past, he said, the truth is you can have, do, or be anything you want with your life. Now, that was pretty shocking for me to hear because up until that time, most of my learning had been in traditional school subjects, science, history, math. I had never had anybody talk to me about my mind and my potential. And also, up until then, I thought when you were born, you were dealt certain cards from the big deck, so to speak, and those are the ones that you had to play. Well, that's fine if you were dealt a great hand, but a lot of us weren't. And here's this person saying, no, it doesn't matter what's happened to you in the past. What is it that you want to do now? That's where you need to focus. Well, something I really wanted at that time was to become a bank manager. I thought, wow, if I could achieve that, what more could I possibly want in life? So that's what I began working towards and started moving up through the ranks. And at one point, ended up going to another financial institution for a promotion. Shortly after being at this new place, the president of the company called me up and said, hey, Posivy, you just came from one of our competitors, and turns out we're looking for a branch manager at one of our locations. It was in the West End of Toronto. He said, do you know of anyone? He was asking me because he was thinking maybe I knew of somebody that, we could go and steal. And I just kind of blurted out, I'm like, other than myself? No. And he just kind of laughed and he said, look, kid, you'll get there, but it's not going to be for another few years. Well, as it turned out, it was just a few months from that phone call that I was offered that position. Now, I tell you that little story not to try to impress in any way, but rather to impress upon you that the truth is you do have deep reservoirs of talent and ability within you. And I bet you haven't even scratched the surface of what you're capable of doing. I also want to mention that I was about 19, 20 years old when I set that goal. And early on, I did share that big dream with one of my colleagues. And his response was, look, Joan, regardless of how competent you might be at that job, no one's going to hire a 20-something-year-old bank manager. Now, I learned a very valuable lesson in that moment, which was that in the future, I was not going to be sharing my most heartfelt big goals with anybody that wasn't going to be supportive. There's no value. He and I remained friends for a number of years after that, but sharing my most heartfelt dreams with him was definitely off the table. Now, don't get me wrong. I appreciate a good brainstorming session with someone who will challenge my ideas and help me think it through, but that's not what this was. I was 22 years old when I was offered and accepted the role as bank manager, the youngest I was told in Canada at that time. And I'm sure as hell glad that I didn't listen to some of the people around me that said it couldn't be done. The truth is, no one can even guess at the potential that you've got locked up inside you that has yet to be expressed. So I worked in the role as a bank manager for a couple of years, and then I realized this isn't it. This isn't really where my heart is. So decided it was time to leave. And that was one of the reasons why I ended up moving out west. So I found myself in a little mountain town, which was really sweet, and the mountain lifestyle was super fun. But the economy in the area was not doing well at the time. And I noticed in the local paper that there was an opening for a loans and mortgage officer at one of the banks, and it was one of the top 5 banks in Canada. And I thought, oh, I really don't want to go back into banking, but this is too good to pass up. Steady paycheck, figure out what's going on in the town. So I jumped back into banking. But soon enough, the side hustle spirit kicked in. And I learned that just a few doors down, there was a delicatessen for sale. The young guy who started it up was really just starting it as a favor for his father, who had been working somewhere else in a corporate position and was going to retire. And the idea was the son was going to get this deli up and running. Dad was going to retire and then walk in. Well, Dad did retire, but then he passed away. And the son was stuck with this business that he clearly did not want to be there. And it was kind of going out of business. So I ended up buying it essentially for the cost of the equipment. So that was my new side hustle. The advantage of staying at working at the bank at the time, of course, is that we could live off my full-time salary while we developed the side hustle of the delicatessen. So any profits that that new business was generating, we could plow back in because it certainly needed it. I'd mentioned the economy in the area was depressed at the time, so much so that there were other delis, even on the main street where we were as well, that ended up closing their doors while ours prospered. And I got to tell you, it wasn't because we had any superior marketing smarts or business acumen. It was simply because we were focused on where we wanted to be and not the current circumstances of the business. And a year later, I was able to quit my job at the bank and go work with the deli full time. And I remember at the time when I was thinking of buying the deli, the commercial loans officer at that bank told me that it was a dumb idea. And he listed off all the reasons why I shouldn't go ahead with it. What did I know about food? The town didn't need another food place. And that same guy, I kid you not, a year later, when I was able to quit my job there, he said, "You're so lucky. You're so lucky you've got this other business that you can turn to and walk away from this branch." Yeah, luck. I don't think so. I know that if we think in a certain way, that drives our behavior, giving us the results that we're looking for. Overnight? Nope, not necessarily. But there is a creative process that we can follow to improve any aspect of our life. To people on the outside, yeah, you might appear lucky. I just smiled to him and wished him well and was happy to walk out of the branch for the last time that day. We continued to build up the deli for several years and then sold it for many, many times what we paid for it. Then, due to a number of reasons, I ended up back in Toronto, but this time in the East End. Together with two different business partners, we formed a flower business. It was predominantly wholesale and we had a small retail store. Now, you know how you can go into a convenience store and buy a few fresh flowers that are wrapped in clear cellophane, usually carnations, sometimes roses? Well, that was us. Now, alongside that business grew two side hustles. One, we operated a string of country markets, flea markets, they're called, where we sold Phantom of the Opera jewelry because one of the partners knew someone who had the licensing rights, and we sold limited edition prints from a local artist. Now, it was interesting how at one point the flower business and the flea markets intersected. Neither myself nor our two partners knew anything about flower arranging, although we loved flowers. So we needed to attract somebody to fit that role. Because this was a startup, we didn't have a whole lot of money to put towards actually paying someone. Well, one day at the market, when we were set up selling our things, there was a person directly across who was selling cases of Campbell's soup and old books. And the guy running this booth was like, he was a big guy. He must have been 400 pounds. And he had hands on him the size of baseball mitts. Now, you wouldn't look at him and think, I betcha he knows how to handle flowers. But I struck up a conversation with this guy, real sweetheart of a person. And as it turned out, his family owned one of the oldest and most respected flower businesses in Toronto. But he had had some kind of falling out with the family, and while he used to do a lot of flower arranging for them, he wasn't with them anymore. And as it turned out, that, of course, was something we needed, but at the same time, he needed what we could give him, which was the ability to help increase his self-esteem, his confidence, and he came to work with us, and we did this nice little trade. The takeaway for me was that it's so important to focus on the end result you're looking for the business, but be open as to how you're going to get there. If I was going to be going out looking for someone to be our flower arranger, I wouldn't have turned to somebody selling Campbell soup and old books. But we've got to be open, follow your intuition, and see where it leads. Another side hustle I had grew out of the flower business, and that was selling fresh cut flowers on the side of the road during major flower holidays. And what do you think the number one day for flower sales is in North America? Mother's Day, followed by Valentine's Day. Huge flower sales both those days. I remember as a kid, periodically I would see someone at the side of the road selling flowers, and I thought, How much money can you really make doing that? Turns out quite a lot. Quite a lot. If you've got the right location, you can source a good product at a good price, and you're in that high traffic location. It was actually a lot of fun. The retail store that we set up was very unique for the area. We wanted to promote the idea of people buying fresh flowers on a regular basis, not just for special occasions. So the bulk of the store actually was this large, beautiful walk-in cooler that customers would walk into and be able to choose their own flowers. So they'd pick up, I don't know, a couple of carnations, a rose, some irises, some freesia, and put together this beautiful little package of flowers. And so our prices were very, very low relative to the other flower shops in town because people weren't spending the money all the time on the skills of a flower arranger. And that, coupled with us selling flowers at the side of the road, we weren't very popular with the traditional flower shops in town at all. And when we actually opened, it was just before Valentine's Day. And I put together a pretty extensive campaign, including a mail drop in the area with a flyer announcing our opening with a ridiculously cheap price for a dozen roses. So much so that when we opened that morning, we were literally had customers lined up around the corner. One of those customers that morning was this young guy. I'll never forget him. He came in and he said, "I am so fortunate. Every morning, my wife makes me breakfast. But this morning, when I came down into the kitchen, the only thing on my plate was your flyer." I want to share with you a tip that I have used in every successful side hustle or business I've been involved in. And that is to build in your mind's eye an image of the desired outcome that you're looking for. And hold on tight to that, because what that does is allow you to begin to bridge the gap between the image that you're holding in your mind and what's actually happening in your external world. But if you do that over time, you'll begin to see ways for you to be able to create that, for you to be able to manifest that. And as those ideas and intuitions arise, then you've got to take action on it. But it's true. If you can see yourself in your mind's eye already in possession of the goal, that's proof that you can do it. You may not know how in that moment, but know that you can. If you can hold it in your head eventually, you'll be able to hold it in your hand. I actually have more personal side hustle stories to tell, but for this week, that's a wrap. Maybe someday there'll be a part 2. But before you go, consider this. Every day, results appear in your life. Do you like what you see? I bet you're experiencing good success in some areas of your life, and that's great. Acknowledge those wins. Pat yourself on the back. Realize that in creating those successes, you did many things right to make it happen. But what did you do differently to create those successes, but not others? Wouldn't it be great if you could uncover the magic behind what went right for you to manifest those wins in such a way that you could apply those same principles to achieve success in each and every aspect of your life? It would truly seem magical. But the truth? It's not magic at all. What you did is totally learnable, doable, repeatable, and something that you can play with mastering for the rest of your life. And it's heaps of fun. If you want to see more of the results that are showing up in your life, the ones that you truly want, check out my 12-part video course that you'll find at turnyourthoughtstothings.com. Again, turnyourthoughtstothings.com. It just might be the one missing piece to your success puzzle. There you'll also find a free preview of session 1. Also know that our podcast lives at sidehustleheropodcast.com. And lastly, I'd love to hear your feedback on the show. How is this podcast helping you? What areas could we do better? Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @Joan Posivy. Thanks for listening and hustle on.